Can you please submit that to the website?
Yeah, that's your review, Sam.
I'm kind of been blackmailed into recruiting.
Morning.
No, I'll sign up for a couple hours.
Next week I feel like dying.
All right, good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
Okay, so before we get started on the material for today, let's quickly review what we covered in chapter 4. We learned how to name alkanes, right? What's the first rule of naming alkanes? What's the first thing we find? Longest chain. Then we circle it, right? What's the second thing that we do? Pardon? That's right. We're going to number the carbons in a way that gives those substituents the lowest possible numbering system, right? And then we're going to put the substituents, identify their location, put any prefixes that we need, and then the name of the parent, right? All right, good. And so we also learned about Newman projections, right? What is a Newman projection? That's right. It's taking a three-dimensional model and putting it into a two-dimensional plane, looking down what? A particular carbon-carbon bond. That's exactly right. All right, so good. So today we're going to get started in on chapter 5, which is stereochemistry, which is perhaps my most favorite stuff. Okay, this is what my group does all the time. We do things to where we make different hands, if you will, of molecules, and you'll understand what I'm talking about here in just a moment. So the learning goals for today is really to figure out what a stereoisomer is and how does that differ from a constitutional isomer. We're going to talk a little bit about starch and cellulose. We're going to figure out what's the difference between the two, right? If you think about starch, what do you think about? Potatoes, food, right? But if you think about cellulose, what do you think about?
Fat.
Cellulose? Not cellulite, cellulose. Cell walls in plants, paper, right? Cotton. You know, you wear cellulose. Well, you shouldn't wear starch, right? Do they have different physical properties? Absolutely. But in fact, they are exactly the same molecular formula. They are stereoisomers of one another, but they have very different properties. Then we're going to talk about chirality, which is handedness of molecules, and you'll understand what that means here in just a minute, and talk a little bit about stereogenic centers. Okay, so I want you to take your model kit, and I want you to get a single carbon piece and the 4 colored spheres that you have. So you should have a green sphere, a blue sphere, a red sphere, a white sphere, and a single carbon piece. Okay? And what I want you to do, okay, is I want you to, at random, put those 4 different colors on that single carbon atom. Just at random. Doesn't matter which one you start with, which... Did we all make the same thing?
Yes.
We all have a single carbon atom with the 4 same colors attached to it, right? It looks like we should have the exact same thing, does it not? If we were to name it, we would name them all the same, right? But in fact, we may or may not have the same thing. So let me take a look at yours. If I look, if they're the same, I should be able to point for point, get all the atoms to line up, right? I think this one's yours. This one's mine, right? And if we look at them, I notice that I can't get everything to line up. I can get the greens to line up. I can get the whites to line up. I can get the carbon atoms themselves to line up. But notice the reds and the blues don't line up. They look the same in a lot of respects, but they are not the same. One is like my right hand, one is like my left hand. How are our hands related to one another? They are mirror images, but everything has a mirror image. They are non-superimposable mirror images, right? And so molecules can also have this property where I have a right-handed version and a left-handed version, right? Let me take a look at yours. Let's see. Let's see if we can get things to line up here. Ah, you and I did make exactly the same thing. So at random, I have one that is a non-superimposable mirror image, and I have one that's identical. What do you think will happen if I go through the entire class? We're going to find that half and half, pretty much, and that's how it usually goes. When I'm teaching the really large class, I go through maybe 10 or 15 of them, and it's almost exactly 50-50. One of them will be identical to mine. One of them will be a non-superimposable mirror image. Okay? These are stereoisomers. Stereoisomers are those isomers that have the same molecular formula, the same connectivity, but the three-dimensional placement of the atoms in space is different. Okay? They have the same connectivity, but the three-dimensional arrangement of those atoms in space is different. Okay? Now, usually we're not dealing with little plastic model kits. We're dealing with real molecules. And that's why the starch and cellulose example. What is different between cellulose and starch? They're both sugars. They're both polysugars, right? Polysaccharides. What can you tell me that's different?
Starch looks more squished.
Pardon?
Starch looks more squished.
More squished?
Yeah.
Okay. And why do you say more squished?
Because that one was like pulled down and then that part's like bent.
Okay,
in.
yeah. So would you agree that the connectivity between the two is identical? Yeah. But the difference is how this atom is in space, right? Three-dimensionally. In cellulose, it's equatorial between the two six-membered sugar rings, right? Here, however, it's axial equatorial. And that makes all the difference in the world.
And the O's down.
Yeah, because this is axial,
No, the
right?
other one.
Which one?
On the end.
Here?
Yeah.
Yeah, because that's going to be another one of these. It's a polymer. Yep. And this is just focusing on one monomer. But this is really the difference, right? And so, what do we know about the physical properties of cellulose? We can't digest it. It's pretty tough. It makes a pretty good building material, right? If I take my shirt, which is cotton, which is cellulose, right, and I put it in the washing machine, I'm going to get my shirt back. If I built my shirt out of starch, would that happen? No. One's water soluble, one's not. Exactly the same molecular formula, exactly the same connectivity, but different orientations in space. Makes all the difference in the world. Okay? And so if you look at the extended structures of cellulose and starch, what you'll find is that little tiny change has a big change in how these things really exist in their entire, when you look at the whole thing, the whole polymer. Cellulose actually, it's kind of a three-dimensional network of sheets, okay? Whereas starch is a helix. Simply going from an equatorial bond to an axial equatorial bond makes all that difference. Structure is very, very important. You have enzymes in your gut that can process starch. You do not have enzymes in your gut that can process cellulose. If humans could digest cellulose, there would be no world hunger. Cellulose is extraordinarily abundant, but we can't process it. Okay? All you have to do to figure out how to feed the world is figure out how to get cellulose to go from an equatorial to an axial equatorial. It's just that simple. But that simple statement, not so easy to do. Okay? So, we can't process cellulose. It's roughage for us, right? When we're eating our salads, the cellulose, we don't digest it. It's good for you, but you're not going to get any energy out of it, right? Whereas when you eat the potato or the bread, stuff made out of starch, right? We can get energy out of it, whether it's healthy for us or not, okay? Now, if you take starch Or you take cotton and you hydrolyze it, boil it up in acid. You get the exact same sugar. You get glucose. Both of them are polymers of glucose. Okay? But one of them is assembled in this equatorial fashion. The other one is assembled in this axial equatorial fashion. Very different in terms of their physical properties. Okay? Very different in terms of their physical properties. All because of how things are arranged in space. Would you say that cellulose and amylose, as it's drawn up there, are they non-superimposable mirror images, or are they different molecules?
They don't look like mirror images.
That's because they are not mirror images. You're absolutely correct. They are not mirror images of one another. And so they do have physical property differences. Okay? However, in the exercise that we just did, where I have this molecule and this molecule, what would you say about the physical properties of both of these with respect to each other? They're identical. This will have an identical boiling point to this molecule. It will have an identical melting point. It will have an identical IR spectrum. It will have an identical thin layer chromatogram. You guys done TLC yet in lab? No? Well, okay, you'll learn it next week. They'll give you the same spots on TLC. Okay? They only differ in one property with respect to each other, and that's how they rotate plane polarized light. But that's for another lecture. Okay? So, two major classes of isomers. We have constitutional isomers, which we've already talked about, and stereoisomers, which we're talking about today. Right? So, constitutional isomers have the same molecular formula, but are different how? That's right. How the atoms are arranged is different, right? So we can have different carbon-carbon connectivity. We can have different functional groups, all those kinds of things. Will they have different physical properties? Absolutely. Will they have different names? Yes. What happened? Oh, not me. Okay. Stereoisomers, however, differ only in the way the atoms are oriented in space. They will have identical IUPAC names, except for certain prefixes like cis or trans, okay? And they always have the same functional group. If they don't have the same functional group, they can't be stereoisomers. So if you have an alcohol and you think that this next thing might be a stereoisomer to it, it better be an alcohol. If it's an aldehyde, not a stereoisomer. It may be a constitutional isomer, but it's not a stereoisomer, okay? Now, when you have a particular three-dimensional arrangement, we call that a configuration. This molecule has a particular configuration. This molecule has the opposite configuration. And on Monday, you're going to learn how to name those configurations. Okay? But for right now, you can think of them as a left-handed molecule and a right-handed molecule. Okay? So let's do a quick little concepts test. Tell me, are these pairs, the green pair, the blue pair, and the yellow pair, are they constitutional isomers or stereoisomers with respect to one another? How about the green pair? Constitutional. That's exactly right. They have a different constitution. How would you name the molecule on the left? What's the parent? 2,3-dimethylpentane. How would you name the molecule on the right? 2,4-dimethylpentane. Right? Do they have the same IUPAC name? No. Are they going to have the same boiling point? No. Are they going to have the same melting point? No. Okay. How about the blue pair? Those are constitutional isomers. What differs between the molecule on the left and the molecule on the right? All right, so we're talking about differences in functional groups, right? What's the functional group on the left? Not an ester. An ether. Yeah. And the one on the right? Alcohol, right? So we have an alcohol on the right, an ether on the left. They must be, if they have the same molecular formula, they must be constitutional isomers. How about the yellow pair? Those are stereoisomers. right? How would you name, without any prefixes, that molecule?
Trans on the left and then cis on the right.
Trans what?
Trans cyclobutane.
What about the substituents? So what's the parent? It's cyclobutane, right? So it's trans 1,2-dimethyl cyclobutane. And the one on the right? Cis 1,2-dimethyl. Exactly the same name except for that prefix. And that prefix, trans, tells us how those two methyl groups are oriented in space. They're on opposite sides of the plane, of the board. Cis means that they are on the same side of the plane of the board, right? Okay. If we look at the example on the left, we clearly have constitutional isomers. Same molecular formula, but the position of the methyl group is different, right? We have 2-methylpentane versus 3-methylpentane. Things are connected differently. However, on the right, same molecular formula, but things are connected identically, right? It's 1,2-dimethyl. It's 1,2-dimethyl cyclopentane in both cases. The connectivity is exactly the same, but the relative orientation in space is different. On the right, or excuse me, on the left, we have the two methyl groups being cis to one another, and on the right, we have those two methyl groups being trans to one another, okay? And so they have exactly the same name except for that prefix, which tells us the relative orientation of the alkyl groups there. Okay? And so molecules do have handedness. We have our right hand, we have our left hand, right? Think about your hands a little bit. If I hold my right hand up to a mirror, ignoring my blemishes and such, what is the reflection? What is reflecting back at me if I hold my right hand up to a mirror? My left hand. My left hand is reflecting back to me. That's my right hand, but the image that's coming back is my left hand. It is. Okay? And so my right hand and my left hand are mirror images, but I can't take my right hand and make it my left hand, can I? I can't line everything up. Okay? So my hands are actually what we call chiral. Okay, anytime you have a molecule, or anything actually, that has a mirror image and it's non-superimposable with that mirror image, it's said to be chiral. Okay? So, is my right hand equivalent to my left hand? Is it equivalent? If it was equivalent, I'm right-handed. How many of you are right-handed? Any left-handed ones in here? No lefties?
Oh. It's not equivalent because then you just have two left hands.
Okay. Can you think of anything that you absolutely have to, if you're right-handed, you have to think about buying a particular type of something? I mean, if you buy a baseball glove, right, can you just buy any old baseball glove? If you're right-handed, you have to have a right-handed baseball glove, right? If you're left-handed, you have to have a left-handed baseball glove. How about scissors?
The only time they sell it for right-handed people, pretty much.
They have right-handed scissors and they have left-handed scissors, right? And it matters, right? The molecules in your body right now, your proteins, are chiral. And it matters because certain drugs can interact with that if they have the right chirality. Other ones may kill you if they have the wrong chirality. Okay? And we'll talk about those. Okay? How about socks? Are they chiral or achiral? Achiral meaning not chiral. They are achiral, assuming we're talking about the socks that don't have the toes built into them, okay? When you get a regular pair of tube socks, you don't worry about putting a sock on your left foot or your right foot. That's because socks are not chiral, okay? So it's an achiral thing, tube socks are, okay? How about a brandy snifter? Is it chiral or achiral? It's right there. Is it chiral or is it achiral? If I take that and its mirror image, would it be superimposable or non-superimposable? It is achiral. Can anybody tell me why it's achiral? Why is it and its mirror image perfectly superimposable?
Round symmetry.
What kind of symmetry? It does have symmetry. What kind of symmetry does that item have? Pardon? Okay, what do you mean by that? Like a plane, right? There's a plane that cuts it in the middle, right? Absolutely. Right. How about a boat propeller? Is that chiral or achiral?
It points in direction.
Okay, it's got a pitch, right? Got kind of like a screw sense to it, right? It's not a complete screw, but it's got kind of a direction to it, right? They are chiral. You can take a boat propeller and its mirror image, and you will find that they are not superimposable. And it matters. Because if you buy the wrong boat propeller for your boat and you go forward, guess what will really happen? You'll go backwards. Right? It matters how that twist is. And that twist, if you look at a mirror image, it is non-superimposable with its mirror image. So it is chiral. How about a pair of shears? Those are chiral. That's exactly right. There is no plane of symmetry. Okay? My left-handed shears will only work well in my left hand. My right-handed shears will only work right in my right hand. Right? They have handedness. So they are chiral. How about a hammer? You can hammer with your left hand and your right hand. Does that make it chiral? It is achiral. What's the symmetry element that makes it achiral? If I take that hammer and I turn it up on its head to where I'm looking at the claw, there's a mirror plane that runs right through it. So we're starting to see something about mirror planes and things, right? If something has a mirror plane, can it be chiral? Doesn't seem to be the case, does it? But things that don't have that symmetry element of a mirror plane, they seem to be chiral, right? Okay. That's chiral? That is chiral. That's right. So right-handed gloves, left-handed gloves, they can be mirror images of one another, but they're not going to be superimposable, right? Okay. Now, take your molecule that you have and replace the green one with another blue one.
Could it be similar?
I don't know that I have another blue one. There we go. Now, do we all have the same thing? Will you all agree that these are mirror images of one another? Yep. But, if I can twist it around, right? There we go. Perfectly superimposable. Each and every one of ours would be perfectly superimposable. So what does that tell us? It is achiral. What else does it tell us?
The same molecule.
It is the same molecule. It does have a mirror plane, right? What else does it tell me?
And you can make as much as you want of it, and you will be able to use all of it in exactly the same way.
Okay. What else does it tell us? If I have a carbon atom that has 4 different things around it, is it going to be chiral or achiral? If I have a carbon atom that has 2 identical things on it, is it going to be chiral or achiral? It's going to be achiral. A carbon atom with 4 different things attached to it is called a stereogenic center or a chiral center. You will hear me use those words interchangeably. They're easy to identify. You find a carbon atom, you ask yourself, does it have 4 different things attached to it, or are some of the things the same? If the answer to that question is it has 4 different things, it's a chiral center. Okay? If I have a carbon atom that has two or more identical things attached to it, it can't be chiral. Okay? It can't be. At a single carbon atom. Okay? We'll see examples of bigger molecules that can have chiral centers, but will not be chiral overall. Okay? Water, H2O, not chiral. It is an achiral molecule. Why? I've got two hydrogens attached to the oxygen. That's one explanation. And it also has a what? A mirror plane of symmetry, right? Running right through the oxygen atom and bisecting right through here. So the left half and the right half are mirror images of one another internally, right? And so if I take the mirror image of this, they're going to be perfectly superimposable. Okay? How about bromochloromethane? It is achiral as well, right? Because I have a mirror plane of symmetry. Where does the mirror plane of symmetry lie within that molecule? Define the plane for me.
It's like, you talk like goes in a few hydrogens different.
Yep, that's exactly what I'm saying. The HCH, right? That's where the plane is going to be, right? And it's actually in the plane of the screen as it's drawn there, right? Because if you look at it, the bromine, which is the orange sphere, is coming out of the plane of the board towards us, and the green sphere is going back to the chlorine. Okay. These are some rules that you need to know. You have to know these. Do not waste your time putting this on a note card for an exam. Know this material. A molecule with no stereogenic centers will not be chiral in general. We will see examples of molecules that don't have a chiral center that are chiral. We just went through things that exist in real life, right? That have no stereogenic center that are chiral. There is no carbon atom with 4 different things on a pair of shears, but they're chiral, right? But in general, if a molecule doesn't have a stereogenic center, it will not be chiral. Okay? With one stereogenic center, a molecule will always be chiral. If you have one stereogenic center and only one stereogenic center, the molecule will be chiral. However, if you have 2 or more stereogenic centers, a molecule may or may not be chiral. I can have stereogenic centers, but the molecule itself could overall be achiral because maybe there's a plane of symmetry. Okay? And achiral molecules will contain planes of symmetry, but chiral molecules do not. And of course, a plane of symmetry is a mirror plane that cuts the molecule in half so that one half of the molecule is a reflection of the other half. It does not have to go through atoms. Very important. The mirror plane does not have to go through atoms. It can go through bonds. But if you can find a mirror plane within the molecule, it's not going to be chiral. Okay? So repeat these for me. If I have no stereogenic centers, in general. If I have one stereogenic center, always chiral. If I have 2 or more, may or may not be. If I have a mirror plane, it will be achiral, right? So there's our example, one of the methane molecules. This is bromochlorofluoromethane on the right. And you will see that there is no mirror plane of symmetry, and so it is a chiral molecule. And I know that right off the bat because I know that single carbon atom has 4 different things attached to it, right? It has a hydrogen, it has a chlorine, it has a bromine, and it has a fluorine. That makes it a stereogenic center. And it only has one stereogenic center. Therefore, it satisfies one of those rules, right? However, if I look at bromochloromethane, I notice that the carbon atom has 2 identical substituents, 2 hydrogens. Okay? It does not have a stereogenic center, so it is not chiral. And it also contains a mirror plane of symmetry that's shown there, right? And so the left half and the right half are identical by mirror symmetry. And so it's not going to be a chiral molecule. Okay? And so, mirror symmetry. Are you all comfortable with symmetry? Okay. Mirror symmetry is one of the things that you can't have in a chiral molecule. Does anybody know what the other one is? Can't have a mirror plane. What else can't we have?
More than two of the same things attached to the carbon.
Yeah, but that's not a symmetry element. That would give us a mirror symmetry. We can't have an inversion center either. Okay? We can't have a mirror plane, and we can't have an inversion center. Okay? We'll see an example of an inversion center here in just a moment. Here's some simple little molecules that you may or may not know about. Some of them are medicinal, that have chiral centers. Okay? Propoxyphene, trade name Darvon, it's an analgesic. Does anybody know what an analgesic is?
It makes you fall asleep.
No, it doesn't make you, it might make you drowsy, but that's not, it's what? Pain relief. That's right, analgesic is a pain reliever. Okay? It has 2 chiral centers. Why is this a chiral center?
There's 4 different things attached.
What are the 4 different things? Can you name them for me? It has an aromatic ring. What else does it have? It has a methylene. CH2 is known as a methylene. What else does it have? An oxygen and another carbon that's clearly different from this carbon, right? 4 different things attached to that carbon. It must be a stereogenic center. This carbon has 4 different things attached to it. What are they? A methyl group, a methylene, a hydrogen, and another carbon that's clearly different than the other carbons. So must this molecule be chiral? Not necessarily. In this case it is, because the 4 things on the one carbon and the 4 things on the other carbon are clearly different. But by our rules, this may or may not be chiral. And this is just one of those examples where it actually is chiral. Okay? Ephedrine. Okay, this is a bronchodilator and decongestant. It is also a precursor to methamphetamine if you remove that, right? Very powerful medicine, very useful. 2 stereogenic centers, right? We have a hydrogen, an aromatic ring, an OH, a hydrogen, a methyl group, and a nitrogen. So we have 2 chiral centers. Fructose, simple sugar. We all like fructose, at least most of us do, right? How many chiral centers do we have there? We have 3 different chiral centers. We have 3 different chiral centers in this particular case. Mother Nature makes only the fructose, even though she has 50-50 odds of making each chiral center. She's very good at doing this. Okay? And so that's what we try to do in my lab. We try to mimic how Mother Nature can make these chiral molecules in the laboratory, and it's not easy. There's been numerous Nobel Prizes awarded for such efforts. None will go to me, but nonetheless.
You don't know that.
No, I do know that. Stereogenic centers. Okay? To identify whether we have a stereogenic center, right, we need to identify whether or not we have 4 different things attached to the carbon, and we need to determine whether or not there are mirror planes. I cannot overemphasize this. Model building is important. You all will try to sit down and do this in your head. You all will get frustrated, and then you will come back and you'll say, Dr. Masterson was right, I need to build the model. Okay? Save yourself the heartache and just build the model. Okay? When you're getting ready to do your exam, it's a good idea to come with some of your model pieces already assembled so that you can build whatever you need to build a lot more quickly. Okay? So, this molecule is 2-butanol. Where's the stereogenic center? Is it a quaternary carbon? This carbon, right? It's the carbon with 4 different things attached to it, right? What's this solid wedge mean? Coming out of the plane towards us, and this dash wedge? It's going behind the plane, and everything else lies in the plane of the screen as it's drawn, right? So we've got one here. We have the mirror image. If I take this one and try to superimpose it, they are not going to be superimposable. That's exactly right. Okay? We can also not have centers of symmetry, or what's known as inversion centers. Can anybody identify that here? Where does the center of symmetry lie?
From that green, the other one, the red one.
I mean exactly where is the center of symmetry?
Dividing the red atoms in half.
Multiple, aren't there? So you got a couple of.
It's right in the center of the cyclobutane ring. So if I go from one element of interest, and we'll just pick on the green sphere, and I go through the center, I go out an equal distance in the same direction, I'm at the same exact identical element. And I could draw one there, and I could draw one there, and I could draw one through there. You cannot have centers of symmetry. The real rule is that you cannot have an improper rotation axis. What's all that, right? It's just easier to remember. You can't have a mirror plane and you can't have a center of symmetry. You can have other symmetry elements. You can have a C2 axis, for example. Does anybody remember what that was from Gen Chem? No? That's okay. We're not going to talk too much about it. But you can have certain symmetry elements in chiral molecules, but you cannot have a mirror plane, nor can you have a center of symmetry or an inversion center. Okay. Why is C1 not a stereogenic center? Okay. And these happen to be identical, right?
Yeah.
Because they're CH2s that are attached to 2 additional CH2s, right? Also, there's a mirror plane. Where does the mirror plane exist? Right through there, right? So if I built a model, I would see right down the middle through that methyl group, hydrogen and C1 cutting through that bond, there would be a mirror plane. Okay? How about C3 here? Yeah, we can have chiral centers in rings. I notice that I have this carbon's attached to a hydrogen, a methyl group, a methylene, and a CH, right? So I've got 4 different things attached to that carbon. It's a chiral center. There is no mirror plane in that particular molecule. Where's the chiral center? I've got 3 C's up there.
The first one's connected to the CH3, but the very first. No, the other one, yes.
Okay? Tell me why.
Because it's connected to CH2, it's connected to O, it's connected to H, and it's connected to CH3.
Yep, you got it. Right, so it is attached to a hydrogen. It is attached to a CH3, to an OCH2, right? OCH2, and it's attached to a CH2O. 4 different things. That makes that a chiral molecule, right, at that one center. Now, stereochemistry plays a big role in the pharmaceutical industry, and we'll talk a little bit more about this later, but I want to give you some examples. The molecule that you see up there at the top is known as thalidomide. Anybody know what thalidomide was prescribed for? Morning sickness in females, many, many years ago, right? And it's a very good anti-nausea drug. Okay? And it turns out that this hand of the molecule does all the work. But they gave females an equal mixture of both hands. the left hand and the right hand. And it turns out that the right-handed molecule, as I've got it up here anyway, is a teratogen. Anybody know what that means? Severe birth defects. Gruesome birth defects, as a matter of fact. Okay? They are identical molecules in all respects, except one is not a superimposable mirror image of the other. Right? Why is there a difference medically? The same reason that my right hand fits into a right glove but not a left glove, right? It's the same principle. My right hand in a right glove is not the same thing as my right hand in a left glove. The same thing with medicines. The left medicine with a receptor, and receptors on your cells are chiral, is different than the right-handed and a receptor. Okay? And so it turns out this was a real problem. Okay? A severe problem. And so today, if you take a drug that's chiral, and everyone in here has taken a chiral drug, the FDA requires that the pharmaceutical manufacturer do one of two things. Either provide it in what we call an enantiomerically pure form, being only one hand, or you have to prove that the mixture of both hands causes no harm. How hard is it to prove that something doesn't cause harm? That's hard. So pharmaceutical companies spend billions of dollars every year, not just how to figure out how to make the drug, but how to make a single hand of that drug. And that's not hard to do if you have one or two chiral centers. But many drugs have lots of chiral centers, and that becomes a real significant challenge. For example, let's make it simple. Table sugar has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 chiral centers. Almost impossible to synthesize in the laboratory. Mother Nature can do it like that. It's cool, huh? Taxol. How many chiral centers do we have? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Did I count that one? 11. The yew tree can make it just fine. People in the lab are still trying to figure out how to completely synthesize it. In that single set where each stereocenter is of the right hand, the correct hand, I should say. Okay? It is a difficult thing to do. There have been complete and total syntheses of Taxol in the correct shape. People have gotten substantial awards for doing so. The problem is it's not particularly practical. Does anybody know what the problem with Taxol is in terms of just getting it from the natural source? To treat people, we would have to completely wipe that tree out of existence. Because there's so little Taxol in the tree that we cannot practically get it from its natural source. We would decimate that particular species. Okay? So they're trying to find ways to engineer plants that can do this. Okay? Because it's not completely out of the realm of synthesis to be able to do this in a laboratory, but it's pretty darn close.